as the pre-health advisor here on campus at WPI. And here with me also, I have a current senior, Gabby Mazzoni. Gabby, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm currently a senior majoring in chemical engineering. I'm currently pre-med and I'm in the middle of an application cycle this year.
Yeah, so Gabby is going to be sharing her perspective from the student side. So if you have any questions for her specifically, feel free. Otherwise, she's just going to jump in whenever she would like to during this presentation. So
yeah, with that, I'm going to disappear. I'm from admissions. My name is Vera. So if you have questions, I'll be in the Q&A box. Otherwise, I'll come back at the end.
Thanks, Vera. And you'll tell me if something doesn't look right. All right, so we're going to take you through, or I'm going to take you through just some things that I want you to know about pre-health programs at WPI. And at the end, if you have any questions, you can feel free to ask them in the Q&A box. So kind of what I want to get across to you is, clearly if this is probably the position that you're in, you're thinking you want to pursue a career in the health professions eventually. So why should you attend WPI? So here are some things that I would encourage you to keep in mind. So number one are the resources available to you at WPI. So we call it a pre-health track. It's not a major on its own. So you pick something that you want to major in, and then you do the pre-health courses alongside that. Depending on what you choose for a major, that might be very much included in what you're studying already, or it might be something that you have to plan to take out, outside of your major if it's not already included. Both are possible, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But some of the resources that are available to you are pre-health advising. So that's essentially me. I'm based out of the Office of Academic Advising, so I'm not associated with a particular major. I advise students from all majors. I advise all of our pre-health students, and then I advise a lot of students who are not pre-health as well. So if there are often times where I have a student who starts out as pre-health and then maybe a couple years down the line decides, actually, I don't want to do that, I still stay their advisor. So you have that consistency. We have a group of faculty on campus who we call them the pre-health committee, and they are dedicated to helping students and supporting them through the process of being pre-health while in undergrad, but then also going through the application process when they're getting ready to apply to their health professions program of choice. I would say the most popular or the most common pre-health tracks for students at WPI would be definitely pre-med for pre-med first. And then after that, I'd say probably maybe a tie between pre-physician assistant and pre-vet. And then we have a spattering of pre-dental, pre-physician assistant, or physical therapist, optometry, and any number of other health professions. But I would say those three are the most popular. We have a lot of resources for academics. So academics at WPI are intense. You're going to have 3 classes per term, 4 terms per year. So it's fast paced, and you definitely want to stay on top of your work. And we have a lot of resources to help you to do that. So tutoring, Gabby happens to be a tutor, so she can talk to you a little bit about that. MASH, which is math and science help, that is kind of group tutoring for all the introductory math and science courses. And then every professor has office hours for every class that they teach. And sometimes the teaching assistant also has office hours. So we basically, there are a ton of academic resources available, and I encourage you to use them early and often, because as a pre-health student, it's important that you keep your academic record competitive. And the best way to do that is to start asking for help early and often. Gabby, can you talk a little bit about what tutoring is like and what kind of things are offered? And
Yeah, so as you mentioned, there's individual tutoring in MASH. Earlier this year, we also had small group drop-in tutoring, and it was in a wide variety of subjects, not just MASH where it's just one subject. I usually individual tutor, and we have tutors in basically all of the intro classes. So if you're ever people come to tutoring even when they're not super lost, but just like has a little extra help. Because all of the tutors are peer tutors and have all gone through the classes, and like some have even had the same professors as you. So just like hearing more about the class from like someone who's taken its perspective is really helpful.
Yeah. And then on the other side of it, you know, if you really excel in a particular area, you also might have the opportunity to become a tutor, like Gabby did, which is, I think, something that's really useful for pre-health students as well, because you're taking this like complicated material and breaking it down to be really understandable for someone who might not, you know, it might not come as naturally to them. So very similar to the way that a doctor would have to, or a dentist or a physician assistant would have to explain something very complicated and scientific, you know, a diagnosis, a prognosis to a patient and make them able to understand it, even though they're not a doctor, they're not a scientist potentially. So, you know, that skill set is valuable. Another resource or something to get involved with on campus are student groups. So we have several student groups that are made up either completely or largely of pre-health students. One is Mu Sigma Delta. That's just our pre-health student society. It's entirely student run. And they have, you know, I think about monthly, I think they meet, maybe a slightly more often at certain times of year. But they have different events and meetings, panels, things that they do. We have Alpha Epsilon Delta, which is our pre-health honor society, which is similar, but it's something that you have to apply to as early as your sophomore year. And then we have things like PAWS, which is, I think, people, do you know what PAWS stands for, Gabby? It's it's mostly pre-vet.
It's like
So
advocating. I know
yeah,
I was
people,
looking
oh,
at
people
flyer
for
for it.
animal welfare. That's what it is. People for Animal
Yeah.
Welfare Society. And so there's a bunch of groups that you can get involved with. And then there's a lot of student groups you can get involved with that don't necessarily have to do with pre-health directly, but are really good experience for you to get if you are pre-health. So Gabby, could you tell us a little bit about some of the groups and organizations that you're involved with, some of the activities you do outside of class?
Yeah, so I'm in Explorer Dreams, which because of COVID hasn't really been happening lately, but they're hoping next year to bring the kids back. But basically, they bring kids in from the Friendly House, which is like a community house in Worcester, once a week, and we would play with the kids for an hour and then help them with their homework and just be like mentors for them, which I really liked pre-COVID when we brought the kids in. I currently do Elm Park tutoring, which is like an elementary school right down the street from us on Wednesdays. I know a lot of the like Greek organizations do that type of thing too. I'm also on the cheer team, which is like not pre-health related at all, but just something fun to do with my time.
Yeah, and also, I mean, everything that Gabby just mentioned is something that I'm sure you probably put on your med school applications, and for good reason. One being that you want to start to be able to demonstrate a commitment to service and helping others. And a lot of our student groups are really focused on that, including our Greek organizations, our fraternities and sororities on campus are very focused on philanthropy. So student groups are a great way to get involved in that type of thing. And then you mentioned cheer. So, you know, athletics on campus, if you're planning on getting involved in that, I think that's also a really good way to develop leadership skills, to develop teamwork skills, you know, endurance, resilience. These are all things that you learn through athletics that are directly transferable to a career in healthcare as well. So that's all, like like you say, on the surface, maybe not directly related, but absolutely beneficial. And then we have an incredible career development center on campus that can help you too. So we, you know, as a pre-health advisor, I generally focus on students who are planning on applying to professional school after graduation. So medical school, veterinary school, et cetera. But there are tons of careers in the health professions that don't require going to professional school, and a lot that you probably haven't even thought about or maybe even heard of. So the Career Development Center is a great way to explore potentially if you're like, I really want to go into medicine or healthcare in some way, but I'm not quite sure I want to go completely through medical school or be a doctor, but I want to help people and I love biology, or I love, you know, I love the life sciences. So that's another resource in addition to just pre-health advising that can help you kind of explore and discover that as well. So WPI offers really unique opportunities. So I think, one thing you want to think about is, you're here in this presentation because you're already thinking about what happens after undergrad, but you do want to think about your undergraduate experience. And that's something that I'm confident is really rich and valuable and worthwhile at WPI for many reasons that also happen to make you a really good, strong candidate for health professions programs afterwards. So some of those are, you see a bunch of letters here: GPS, IQP, MQP, HUA seminars. I will explain what those are, not in great detail, because I'm sure there are probably other parts of admissions events that go over these things more, but a great problem seminar is a opportunity for first year students to engage with project work. So at WPI, you'll have lots of project work and mostly group project work. And there are three: the IQP, MQP, and humanities, HUAs, humanities seminars. Those are like requirements for graduations. You have to do at minimum those three. And then the great problem seminar is optional to do in your first year, but I do recommend it if you want to get some early experience with project work. Gabby, why don't you pick one of those three and tell us about your experience with it?
Yes. So my IQP, I was supposed to go to Australia, but unfortunately,
Can you explain a little what an IQP is too?
Yes. So an IQP is an interdisciplinary, interactive qualifying project. And basically, usually people go away for a term and that's all you focus on the term is your project. And usually it's not related to whatever you're majoring in. It's more of like a, not like social science type project. Like it could be science related, but it's more of a whatever sponsors want you to do. I was supposed to go to Australia for mine, and mine focused on trauma informed teaching because I worked with a community house in Australia that has a lot of kids who are dropping out of school, and they wanted to figure out why that was happening. And they asked us to research trauma informed teaching. Although we weren't able to actually go to Australia, we were able to work with them and to interview a lot of people who are experts in the field. And honestly, it was a really fun project, even though we weren't there. And it was actually super helpful, or not helpful, but I talked about it a lot in my med school interviews. One of my interviewers at one of the schools was actually a child psychiatrist and really wanted to know a lot about it. So although not everyone does a project on it, chances are your IQP will have some sort of impact on your med school application.
Yeah, almost definitely. Regardless of the topic, it's a project where, so it is interdisciplinary. That's what a lot of people do think it's the interdisciplinary. It could easily be, because you have a group of students that are all from different majors. So you're meant to bring sort of your expertise to the table in that project, and it could be any topic. But the point of it is to improve society in some way utilizing technology. And that is something that, again, it's no matter what the topic is very relatable to the health professions careers, and also is something really unique to WPI that is memorable for you to be able to put on an application and talk about. Gabby unfortunately was in the COVID years of not being able to travel, but because that was 2020, right? That was the year. But now, right. So students are going on projects again. And it's something that is really popular to do. But there also are plenty of students that do them on campus. So for whatever reason you do not want to go away, we also have a lot of project centers in the US as well as abroad. So it's definitely a great opportunity. And then the MQP is your major qualifying project, which is similar, but it is focused on your major area. And most students do them here on campus. There are international opportunities for that as well. But and then your humanities seminar is just a project, is a class where you do a project within your depth area of humanities. So we want our WPI students to be well-rounded. Yes, we are very STEM focused, but every single student has to take 6 humanities and arts courses, including this like kind of capstone project that's called your seminar. So again, you're coming out of this with tons of teamwork experience, collaborative experience, tons of project work and research, as well as a humanities background. So just that top bar right there makes you a unique and competitive candidate if you've done all of those things. The next thing I wanted to talk about was fast-paced terms. So I said we have 4 terms per year, A, B, C, and D. There's also summer terms, but those are optional. And they are 7 weeks each, and they are fast. And so, you know, every 7 weeks, you're going to be learning something different, moving on to a new set of classes, a new set of professors, and having to retain the material from the term before because it all keeps building and keeps building. And this is very similar to kind of the setup of most health professions programs as well. So what I hear from our alumni that have gone on to health professions programs is that they feel more ready for that pace and the amount of information that comes at them than their peers who go to traditional semester schools, just because this is what they've been doing all along. So that's something that is unique to us and super helpful later on in the health professions programs. We have obviously a strong STEM curriculum, including all the prerequisites that you need to take. So like I said, you're not going to be a pre-med major or pre-health studies major or something like that. You're going to choose something that you enjoy, that you want to study, that you think might be a good pathway for you if you decide not to go into the health professions, or if you decide that you love, this particular field more, which happens, that, you've got a strong background and are competitive for jobs in that field as well. So Gabby is a good example of a student who did not major in biology or chemistry and is going to medical school. I think there's a misconception that you have to major in life sciences, or that you're more likely to get in if you major in the health sciences or the life sciences. There are a lot of good reasons to major in the life sciences. The first of which is if you love them, you're passionate about them, you're excited about them, you want to major in biology, you want to major in biochemistry. And those majors happen to include all or most of the prerequisites for those health professions programs. So that's a nice bonus. There's nothing that says you have to do that. And there's nothing that says, you'll be more successful if you do. My recommendation is to choose the major you're most excited about, because when you're excited about the material, you're going to be more engaged with it, and odds are you're going to do well because you're enjoying it. So Gabby, as a chemical engineering major, not all of the med school prereqs were included in her curriculum automatically. So she had to do some planning to take courses for med school that were not included in the major. So how did you do that, Gabby? Was it possible? I mean, obviously you're here on the precipice of graduation. So how did you make it work?
Definitely just I sat down with the tracking sheet, and then I sat down with the classes I knew I needed to take, the prereqs, and just I had a few different 4-year plans of when I was taking what. The ChemEng's tracking sheet actually isn't a lot of overlap with the prereqs because we have to take all of the orders, and they suggest you take some biochems as well. So it was mostly just bio classes that I needed to figure out, and you kind of just throw them in where they fit and take the ones that are interesting to you. So I'm in immunology right now, and I really like it.
Cool. Another thing that's unique to us is we have some early acceptance programs. The 2 notable ones are Tufts Veterinary School. It's maybe 15 minutes from WPI over in Grafton, and we have an agreement with them where our students can apply to Tufts Vet School as early as their sophomore year. And if they are accepted, then a seat will be held for them when they graduate. And we've had several students take that pathway. The cool thing about it is that there's really, you want to be competitive, and in order to get in, you need to be. But if it so happens that you don't get in to the early acceptance program, there's they encourage you to apply as a regular applicant the following year. So, and they'll give you feedback to be able to kind of improve and make sure you get in the next time. And so we've had students get in immediately from the early acceptance program, and then we've had students not get in through early acceptance, but then be accepted to Tufts later or to any other school. But that's something that is really nice if you can get in through that program, then you don't have to worry about applying later, and you just kind of know that that acceptance is there. Of course, you have to maintain a certain GPA and take all the prereqs and things, but that spot is being held for you if you do. So that is a nice advantage. And then LECOM is Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine, a DO college or a DO school in, they have campuses in Pennsylvania and Florida. And you can actually apply to that as early as I think your senior year of high school, and then as late as your sophomore year at WPI. So that's similar. You can apply early if you meet certain criteria and you get accepted. The seat is held for you later on. And again, and that is, especially for med school, is pretty incredible, because it means that you don't have to take the MCAT, which is a big undertaking, as Gabby knows. So that is something to consider. And then we also have an assured acceptance agreement with MCPHS Worcester. That's the Mass College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences. And that is with their physician assistant program, their physical therapy program, and a number of other programs there as well, pharmacy, optometry. And basically what that means is they hold a couple of seats for students from WPI who take the certain set of prereqs and meet certain criteria. Of course, you have to interview, but again, these are, good foot in the door type of programs. And then just some general advice for you, like as a student who is getting ready to choose a college and potentially are going to be pre-health. These are just kind of some things that I would keep in mind going forward, and look for a school that's going to, allow you to do this and help you along the way. So one is to explore. So keep an open mind. I know that you already are feeling like you want to go into the health professions. Maybe you want to be a doctor, maybe you want to be a veterinarian, and maybe you will stick with that and you will continue to want that and end up doing that in the end. But it's also very possible you'll find something else that you love. I mean, I have probably 80 to 100 students in each incoming class who like declare themselves as pre-health. Very few of them end up going on to health professions programs. And it's not because they necessarily don't get in, it's because they've chosen other pathways. They've got excited about something else along the way. And so keep an open mind. Don't hold yourself so tight to this goal that you don't take the opportunity to pursue other interests as well, because you never know what is going to be the thing that kind of like lights your fire and that you want to do with your life. So, and luckily at WPI there's a million opportunities to do that. Study what you love. So I kind of already made this point, but don't choose a major because you think, oh, this is good, most likely for me to get into med school or dental school if I choose this. Choose what you want to study. You can take the prerequisite courses. The key is to do well in it, whatever you choose. But you can make anything transferable skills to the health professions from any major. So keep that in mind as well. Definitely ask for help. I think students that get into WPI are obviously good students. You got here for a reason. And so you might be surprised when you get to your first class and you actually are like, wow, this is really hard, like for the first time. And maybe you're not used to asking for help or needing to go to a tutor. Maybe that's new to you, but please, do it. Like I say, early and often, because you're going to thank yourself. Academic record is a huge factor in admissions for health professions programs. So, if you can start off strong in those foundational courses, everything is going to be smoother down the line. So don't struggle on your own. Like, there are resources, you just need to use them. So this is one that gets people to take your time. Like, I always encourage people to take a gap year or two. Gabby's not a good example of this because she's not doing that, but she's the exception. The vast majority of people do take at least a year in between undergrad and their health professions program, particularly medical school. I think the number now is like over 60% take at least 1 year. And this is not a year off. You are doing something valuable with that time. So what would happen is when you are getting ready to graduate WPI, when you're after your senior year, then you would start to plan to apply to your health professions program. So you'd have 1 year in between undergrad and, let's say, med school. And what you would do in that time is any number of things: get more experience, study more for the MCAT or other entrance exams. If you have any remaining prereqs that you need to finish that you weren't able to fit into your 4 years at WPI, you could do that. You could travel, you could work, there's a million things, and anything that you do, you can use to make you a stronger applicant in the process. So I say this really early on because I don't know that people realize that that's a very normal and expected thing to do, and that it's not a disadvantage whatsoever. And it takes a little bit of the pressure off to know it's like, okay, I don't have to get every single thing done in 4 years. It could be 5 or 6. So that's just something I'd like to throw out there. Like we were talking about before, a commitment to service is important. So, in the health professions, that's why people go into the health professions, to help others for the most part, right? So kind of start establishing that now. Get involved with community service organizations, or even just any student groups that do community service, even if it's not directly medical or healthcare related. Just making yourself useful to people in your community. And then just in general, you want to develop those characteristics that they're looking for in the admissions process, which is, compassion, resilience. Like, can you recover from a setback? Do you have good communication skills, good teamwork, good coping skills? Like, these are all things that you can really learn at WPI through some of the experiences that we mentioned earlier. Any other advice, Gabby, from your perspective, like for an incoming pre-health student?
I know there's definitely like a lot of different ways you can get involved, and ways to get the things, like checking off boxes for your application, but definitely try to find things that you enjoy doing, because it makes it so much easier to write about and talk about in your application and during your interviews.
Yes, good advice. And then just in general, I just wanted to note that we have a small but strong group of pre-health students. And like I say, there's actually quite a small number that end up going on to apply to the health professions programs. And every year we have students get into every type of program. I listed some of the schools there that you can see. And then every year I get to kind of add more to that list, because students go to all different places across the country and even internationally sometimes. So just to kind of rest assured that WPI students are out there working as doctors and vets and dentists and things like that. And the great thing is that, with being a small school, and then being a small, the pre-health group being a small population within that, means that me as a pre-health advisor, I get to give a lot of individual attention to each of my advisees and to each of my students that are applying, and alumni as well. So I had talked about, taking time after undergrad, before applying to the health professions programs. Alumni still are able to utilize pre-health advising. And I would say the majority probably at least 80% in every given cycle are alumni and not current students, or graduating seniors who then become alumni during the process. So that's something that, again, I want people to realize that you can still utilize those WPI resources, like the Career Development Center and pre-health advising, after you graduate as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to mention before moving on to questions. I don't think so. I guess we'll open it up for questions, if that works, Vera.
That works for me. I've been hiding here this whole time. Yeah. So I guess, I could ask a question. Let's see if we have anything yet. Doesn't look like we have anything in from the audience. But one question that I get from admissions, is the students want to know, or the families when they're talking to us in the admissions office, is the not just the kind of supports that they're going to have through the process, but how much time does this all take, right? So you're taking these 3 classes over 7 weeks and it's intensive, but what is this on top of, what is studying for the MCAT and what is applying for these schools? What does that look like on top of a WPI course load?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And the thing is, and Gabby can talk about it from firsthand experience, but this is part of the reason that it is a lot. It's a lot. And it's part of the reason that a gap year is attractive, because then you're doing all of that piece after you've graduated, like right after, but after you've graduated. So you get to kind of focus on all that separately. But obviously there are people who do it while they're a current student and it does work out. So Gabby, can you talk a little bit about how that went for you?
Yeah, sure. So I actually took the MCAT at the end of the summer between my sophomore and junior year. And I didn't really start studying for it until classes ended in my sophomore year. So I can't really talk much about taking classes while studying for the MCAT. But I did write most of my essays last year while I was also taking classes. And it's just like a lot about time management, because there are a lot of essays to write, and like you go through like so many different like versions of your essays and going back and editing them. And I would literally write it into my schedule, like chunk off an hour or 2 every like few days, just to like give myself time to go over everything.
I think that's a good approach. You almost act like you have this invisible 4th class that you've got homework for. I think that's a good way to go about it. And yeah, I think it's the kind of thing where if you can manage it with all of your other commitments, then by all means. But if not, it's okay to say, this is too much at one time, and I'm gonna focus on the MCAT and my applications after I graduate, and do all the preparation during my 4 years, but that actual application piece and all that comes along with it afterwards.
So there was a question that's related to that now that in the chat. So how does WPI help with crafting the application? So writing descriptions, personal statements, etc.
First of all, I'm very impressed that someone already knows what AMCAS is. So that's, yes, AMCAS is like basically the common application for medical school. So good on you. But good question. So we do help. So myself and the faculty on the pre-health committee with students that apply to medical school specifically, they go through a whole committee process, an internal application process at WPI before they apply. And we don't place restrictions on who we support to apply to medical school. There are some undergraduate institutions that will put parameters on who they support, like, you have to have a certain GPA or MCAT score. And frankly, we don't need to do that because we have such a small group. There's no reason we can't support them. What we do is give you really candid advice on whether you're going to be a competitive applicant and whether you're likely to get in, and then the choice will be yours. But yeah, so that's really my job is to support you with getting ready for the application, putting your best foot forward. I think one of my favorite parts of the job is when our students at WPI tend to be really accomplished, but really humble about it. So I enjoy kind of like finding those accomplishments and helping you to showcase them on your application. Because sometimes, even when I've known someone for 4 years, I can still, through that application prep process, learn something new about them that I would encourage them to put on their application. Personal statements as well, we can definitely read those and give feedback, myself and the faculty on the committee, because it's nice to have multiple perspectives. And then interview prep. So part of the application process, or the admissions process rather, is to interview. And I'm trying to think if there's any exceptions. I don't think so. Every medical school that I know of does an interview before they decide to accept you, and they can come in different forms, like group or individual, or something called a multi-mini interview, which I don't need to get into right now, but they're all different. But in any case, you need to be prepared. And so we can do, prep for that, mock interviews and things. So Yeah, that's all part of pre-health programs, pre-health advising.
So we have another question. What percentage of applicants from WPI make it to their respective end goal? For example, medical school matriculation percentage. I'm assuming
Sure. So
your goal at the beginning when you enter WPI and your goal when you were leaving WPI could be very different.
right, that's very true, and it often is, right? So like I say, we have a very small number that apply, which means that the percentage is not a good representation of the success, because I'll give you an example. So we had this year one student apply to dental school. She got in. So 100% of our applicants who applied to dental school got in, so, but if we had two and only one got in, it would be 50%. So it's hard to tell anything from that number. But what I do say, especially when it comes to medical school, is that every year that I've been here, which has been 7 years, we've been at or above the national average of acceptance. So we do well. Our students do get in. If our students don't get in, oftentimes they get in on the second try, and that's not uncommon or unusual to have to apply a second time. I think you all are just having gone through the process of applying to college, and usually with college, you're applying to a ton of schools, maybe you get into a couple and you decide. With medical school, it's like it's so competitive, you just really need to get into one. And it's very possible you don't get into one and you end up having to apply a second time. And oftentimes I see with applicants that don't get in the first time, the second time they're a much stronger candidate. They've had an opportunity to evaluate what they could have done better. And then like I'm thinking of an applicant in particular who I worked with, who got a couple interviews, I think ended up on a wait list or two, and then just didn't end up getting in on the first round. And then the second round got in like right away, right at the beginning of the cycle, and had multiple choices to pick from. So usually it's pretty clear like what it is that you need to improve. And that's part of the committee process. Like the advising process is me and the faculty on the committee helping you to understand whether it's realistic to go forward and apply with what you've got. But like I say, we don't stop anyone from applying. We don't not support anyone applying. So at the end of the day, it's the candidate's choice. But in general, our students do well with getting into the health professions programs, but it's a small number, if that helps kind of give you a sense.
So we have another question. Would it be easy to switch majors and change your courses / schedule while taking a pre-health program?
Really depends on which major you started with and which major you're switching to. I've definitely had students switch between things like biology and biochemistry, or biochemistry to biology, or things that are almost like within the same department, or the same where that have a lot of overlapping classes. It would be harder, regardless of pre-health, it would be more difficult to change majors from two completely unrelated topics that don't have a lot of overlapping classes. But again, if it's within your first year, probably still quite doable. A lot of majors have similar courses to start out with. So I'd say almost every type of engineering that we offer, mechanical, aerospace, civil, chem-eng, they're all going to have like a similar start. So they're going to have math, they're going to have chem or physics, and they're going to have humanities or social science. That's like what you're going to start with regardless. So let's say after your first semester, you decided to change your major within engineering or even to something else, probably still plenty of time to do that. Of course, the further you get in. Oh, go ahead, Gabby.
I was gonna say, I actually almost switched my major to biochem last year. I decided not to.
I was gonna say, as a junior, you mean?
Yeah, like halfway through the year, I was like, because I realized that I enjoyed my biochem classes more than my like chem-eng ones. And I planned it out, and I would have had space, but then I was like, that would just not make sense with the amount. Like I've taken most of the chem-eng classes, I can just finish it.
And also your goal was to go to medical school, and that wasn't going to really be affected by a major change. Whereas if you knew you wanted to go into a particular career stemming from a certain major, you would have probably wanted to make that change for sure.
Yeah.
But your point is that even at that late stage, it was an example of a time where it could have worked out time wise. So
Yeah.
I guess what I would say is do your best to choose a major that you think you'll be interested in. When I was in college, I changed my major, I think twice, because you just kind of can't know for sure until you're doing it. And luckily we have the Career Development Center as well, who can help you explore different majors. We even offer, I think we're still offering, like a course on discovering majors, which is like kind of helps you to just learn about the different majors that are out there and the types of careers associated with them, and get a sense of what might be a good fit for you. But yeah, so you're perfectly allowed to change your major. I would just say work with an advisor to understand, how that's going to impact you. Because, I mean, people can't be expected to know exactly what they want to do with their lives at 17 or 18 years old. So you have to have a little bit of wiggle room to be able to change if you want to. And there's definitely an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, so that's it. We're bumping up now to the end of the time that we have allotted. So thank you all for attending today. If you have questions, Elizabeth has already made her email address. So if you do need to ask questions there, of course, if any questions that are for the admissions office, you can email us at admissions@wpi.edu. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Gabby. Good luck, Gabby. This is really exciting to hear that you're about to move on to the next phase of your life. So I've heard that there's not a lot of days of school left. I won't mention the number out loud because I don't want to scare you, but we are nearing the end of the school year here. And to all of our accepted students, good luck with the end of senior year. It's an exciting time for everyone. So with that, enjoy the rest of your evenings. If you're in the United States, if you happen to be in a different part of the world, then maybe it's your morning already. So with that, bye everyone.
Thank you all. Take care.
Bye.